for the DHS strategic sourcing vehicle for uniforms. I've been in this position for about the last 8 years.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. And next we have Tina Cox. She's a government-wide security and protection category manager. She's acting in that role, and she's also an associate director in our SSO office on the category management implementation and support team. Tina, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, good morning. I'm Tina Cox. Yes, I am filling the role as the acting category manager across the federal government for security and protection. Lots of things moving there, and it's pretty exciting. DHS does a lot of work that really is the crux of the government-wide security and protection. And I also am serving as the associate director. My team does a lot of the data analysis, pushing out all of the bloody things like this Category Management Day.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. And last but not least, Brenda Oberholzer. She's a contracting officer in the U.S. Coast Guard. Brenda, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. My name is Brenda Oberholzer. I'm a contracting officer and branch chief at the U.S. Coast Guard. I work for their C5I Service Center, which provides the information technology capabilities for the Coast Guard.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you, panel, for joining us and giving us a few minutes of your day. So before we go ahead and jump into the questions for the panel, let me talk about a little bit about some of the misconceptions of category management. Category management is not just a contract vehicle. I know a lot of times when we're going out and talk to, folks across the components, it's like, how quickly can we get to this contract vehicle? But really, as Jackie mentioned, category management is a strategic approach that kind of enables the federal government to acquire and manage common goods and services more efficiently, and allows us to have, allows us to be a more knowledgeable and organized entity. It's not about using just a contract vehicle. So let me touch on, as Jackie mentioned, a few of the 8 strategies that encompass our category management process. First, requirements analysis. That's where we look and determine, what goods and services are needed and by whom, and if there are overlapping requirements across DHS. Second, spend analysis. That's where we collect, cleanse, and analyze procurement data to understand what's going on within a category, and then we're able to identify opportunities to generate efficiencies and savings. Next, demand management. That's where we forecast, plan, and manage the need for and availability of goods and services. Supplier relationship management. That's a strategic two-way interaction in an effort to develop, kind of a mutually beneficial relationship within, with our industry partners. Market intelligence analysis. That's where we take the information that we derive from the marketplace through our vendor interactions, industrial reports, and other sources to really identify the trends out there in the marketplace. Knowledge management, that's where we document and share what we learn, that expertise that we develop over time to really kind of, like we said, purchase more efficiently and more effectively. Sourcing strategy, that's a fact-based approach to using that market intelligence and other data to really kind of find the best value for the government. And then last but not least, marketing and communication. That's where we kind of effectively educate our customers and our requirements owners on what category management is. And that's kind of what we're doing today. So let's go ahead and kick off the panel. We're going to start with Brenda. Brenda, could you tell us a little bit about how you use CIO SP3 and how you use that kind of to really identify the optimal sourcing strategy for your healthcare services during COVID-19?
In the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. Coast Guard had an immediate need for more flexibility in the way that its physicians provide care to its members. With concerns about the spread of COVID-19, physical offices were drastically limiting their appointments, which limited the care that they could provide the members. My office supported the purchase of a HIPAA-compliant commercial off-the-shelf cloud-hosted software-as-a-service solution for the Coast Guard's telehealth system. Telehealth is the remote delivery of healthcare by a range of options, including but not limited to landline communication services, cellular service, and internet. The need for this service to be up and running was immediate, and the funds identified for the use were FY21, putting us with a deadline of September 30th for award. As a DHS component, my office recognized that we are required to consider DHS strategic sources and quickly identified that this type of service, software as a service, is available from NITAC CIOSP3 Small Business, Alliant 2, and VETS 2. The NITAC CIOSP3 Small Business Contract Vehicle included Task Area 1, which specifically supports healthcare-related information systems and calls out telemedicine or mobile health specifically and includes the HIPAA requirements at the IDIQ level. Looking and through our market research, we were able to determine that the average number of offers in this vehicle is 6. And among the 3 that we reviewed, the NITAC CIOSP3 vehicle also had the smallest contract access fee at 0.55%. This contract vehicle also utilizes the EGO system, which allows RFIs and RFPs to be submitted electronically to vendors, Q&As to be submitted and responded to in the system, and additionally provides submission of proposals electronically, which was really good for us, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when our organization switched to 100% telework and Outlook was not always 100% reliable. We were able to execute a 2-phased advisory down-select source selection utilizing many pill techniques, including product demos in 60 days, making the award on 9/21, which included an average of 27% savings on the contract labor rates, and the solution was able to go live 2 weeks after contract award.
Thank you so much, Brenda. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's dig in there. So what were you planning to do, if you did not use one of our SSVs?
Well, we already knew from a prior acquisition that software as a service solutions were available on GSA because we had done a BPA on GSA IT-70 schedule a year before. The differences primarily in that were the larger offer pool and the time to evaluate those additional offers. We knew, especially considering our 2-phased approach with product demos, would take approximately 151 days based on our prior experience. And so looking directly at these strategic sourcing vehicles, we recognized that we'd be able to, if we could have a smaller pool of already vetted offers, we would be able to expedite our pre-award process.
Oh, wow, that's great. So you had 27% in savings, and also you had a more efficient and more effective procurement. That's great. Thank you for talking through that with us, Brenda. Tina, could you also discuss some of the impacts on supplier engagement when you go deliver solutions for department-wide and both government-wide solutions?
Sure. Good morning. I'm happy to have that opportunity, but first, let me give you some context of where we were. So what I'll focus on is our government-wide working dogs. And Ms. Ravino, as the category manager, government-wide category manager, came up with the concept of centers of excellence. And we knew we had some issues in sourcing these dogs. So we came up with this proof of concept of standing up a tiger team, and it was 14 agencies across the federal government. So you can imagine that was a little bit of a challenge to kind of pull all that together, get all the participation, et cetera. And we quickly found that we had this global shortage of dogs in our federal agencies, and we found we were competing with each other, foreign entities, local and state government, security companies, and we had to kind of dig in and find out what was going on. So we took this 360 holistic deep dive approach in looking at this, and one of the biggest pillars was supplier engagement. And through that process, we can run through some of the things, but we did find out some things that we were doing to ourselves that if we didn't have that relationship with the suppliers, we wouldn't have known.
That's great. Thank you, Tina. So, how did you decide, or why did you decide to sort of use some of these strategies versus some of the, like, just traditional market research?
So we pulled together, the reason we chose to do that was because it was, once we started looking at it and talking to our SMEs within the space, we found that the problem was way more complex than just the shortage of working dogs. So we kind of came at it, our avenue that we came at it was from different avenues. We did the market data, and we went in and we dug into the data. We identified the known suppliers that we knew. And then we went and got assistance from GovShop, some market and research support from GovShop, and we identified all the global suppliers. So with that, we sent out a source of thought, which was basically trying to identify them and if they were willing to fill out a survey. And because we'd been meeting not only with our requirements owners across the government, we met with foreign governments as well, asking questions, trying to get an understanding of what they were buying and how. We found about 40 respondents, and they did the survey. The survey kind of had two target areas. We were looking at the working dog breeders as well as the working dog suppliers. And as I filled out the survey, we were able to kind of take that, go back to our stakeholders and kind of massage what they had told us and kind of get some insights from the government's perspective. And then we went back again and met with the breeders and the suppliers and kind of had like an open-ended industry day, but it was more of a conversation. And we found there was a lot of frustration, a lot of distrust within their group and against the government. They felt like we were showing favoritism to the European market, and just a lot of misunderstandings were taking place. And so as we went through and we met with everyone, we also put out RFIs for ideas on how we could make things better. And we found a lot of good ideas, but we also found there were some things that just not going to work because we have our varied requirements. And so the reason I think the big thing is because of the complexity and the challenges, and we just wanted to capitalize on the opportunity to truly dive into that community from a 360 holistic point of view and understand the problem from everyone's perspective and kind of use that opportunity to gel the communication so that we were sending the right messaging, we were reacting to the messaging that was coming to us when it was appropriate. And because of that, we were able to really do a deep dive into the conversations with industry, and we learned a lot.
Wow. Well, so Tina, just to follow up on that, is that type of engagement and communication, is that a one-time thing, or has that been an ongoing effort?
It has been an ongoing effort. For our Centers of Excellence, we're standing up teams because we found some levers of some things we can improve in supplier relationship and the communication to the supplier group and to develop small businesses and really looking at how to develop the industrial base in the United States versus, just happen to be so reliant on the European market. So yeah, we've been reaching out. We have all of the agencies. They've all learned something from each other. That was what's amazing about this is even within in the federal space, just the lessons learned that were just able to be shared across the table. And so they're learning that this cryptic way of testing and keeping everything secret and not giving enough evaluation feedback, things like that, were actually hurting us, not helping us. So we are reaching out not only with the agencies that are going out and seeking their working dogs and developing those relationships. We have teams within the Center of Excellence that are going to be having those kind of interactions and maybe centralizing some things. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and I can just imagine, once I guess our supplier relationship increases, like we engage, more with suppliers, it's got to be a win-win for the suppliers and the government. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Tina. Could you just wrap up and just tell us some of the benefits that, that you had engaging with suppliers?
Well, I think the hugest benefit we have an opportunity to address some of the disconnects. And there was some distrust. There were some decisions made along the way that broke relationships in the European market. There were assumptions made, that the government's doing things for a certain reason that were just not true. And we were able to address that. There was distrust within the supplier base with each other. And we were able to kind of flesh out what was going on there and understand that better, understand that sometimes something we say or something we hear can shape things in a way that we don't necessarily want, has a ripple effect. But I think the biggest thing was the developing some kind of rapport with our suppliers enough to be frank with us and be honest, whereas they didn't have that before. They felt like, there was a game of gotcha or something going on in the background, and it just, they felt better that we listened to them and we listened to what they had to say, and what they had to say may or may not have been accurate, but at least we gave them voice and we were able to share with them why they may have had a misperception or have our own aha moments. And I just think it opens up a very honest and genuine conversation that's necessary for us to be successful.
Great. Thank you, Tina. I know here at SSO, it's great for us to talk to the suppliers, talk externally, but it's also good for us to kind of, come together internally. A lot of times we do that. We build a commodity council. A commodity council is basically an IPT or a working group, and we do those internally, and we surround it around a particular commodity or, a service. So let's have Mike really kind of dig in there and talk about one of our most successful commodity councils. Mike, could you talk a little bit about the Uniforms Commodity Council?
Absolutely, Lee. Thank you. So the Uniform Commodity Council is still fairly new. This latest contract was awarded in January of 2020. We've just started meeting. We've been working through some transition issues, but it's an opportunity to get all the components together and talk about common issues, talk about common solutions, how to work through those issues, how to compress the timeline to get from a need to an actual item there to our frontline operators. So just the collaboration and communication that's going on now is kind of unprecedented compared to where we've been in the past with the previous strategic sourcing vehicle. So we're excited that we're moving forward, that we're talking, that we've broken down those barriers between the different uniform components. There's about 9 different components within DHS that have uniformed employees. So we're excited about some of the things that we're doing to continue to find ways to best meet the needs of our frontline operators.
Wow. Okay. So Mike, can you walk us through this a little bit? How did you set up the Commodity Council? What were the decisions that went into setting up the Uniforms Commodity Council?
Sure. The first strategic sourcing vehicle for uniforms was awarded in 2014. There was a lot of activity from the components, getting the acquisition documents together. We were meeting monthly. We all had a common goal. And then once we made it through source selection and contract award, it ended. No more collaboration, no more communication. We each went into our own separate stovepipes and managed our programs and didn't talk to one another. About 3-4 years ago, we ran into a situation where TSA and CBP both added a similar item to the uniform contract and missed a huge opportunity to do economies of scale and find a common solution that would have benefited both components at a much better price point. So that's why it became critical, I think, and the decision was to really push for a commodity council when we awarded this current strategic sourcing vehicle, or the DHS Uniform Contract 2, as some people call it. And that's been successful. Not only did we make it through the actual contract award, but we've continued to meet on a monthly basis and work through some common issues. And I mentioned there's 9 components. There's CBP, There's TSA, we have ICE, LETC, Secret Service, Coast Guard, FPS, FEMA, and CISA. And as I mentioned, the communication between the components working through similar problems. We're all addressing currently a taxable uniform issue, and we're having those open discussions and working together to address and resolve that issue. We anticipate that we're going to see, as a result of our meeting, better pricing, faster transition times. Typically, it takes 18 to 24 months to get a uniform item from the need identification through requirements development, through samples, first articles, and actually getting the item on the contract and available to our frontline personnel. Consultation between the different components to work through contract issues, vendor performance issues, the whole one DHS type of model where it's not just one component complaining, but it's all of DHS coming together and having those discussions with the vendor. It's been beneficial so far, and we're really looking forward to some of the tools that we're currently working on.
Well, yeah, that's a huge success there, Mike. Getting 9 components to continually meet, that's almost unheard of. So, great job. All right. So, before we move into questions, and if anyone has any questions, we can go ahead and put those in the chat pod, and we'll address those as they come in. But if you want to learn more about demand management, I encourage you to tune in to the next session. It starts at 10:45. It's the title, What's in the Suit? And Ricardo Harrison is going to moderate that. And I know they have a great panel that's going to dig in a little bit on demand management as well. So before we jump into the questions, let's have. Sorry, Mike.
One thing that I wanted to add. So, as I said, we're excited about some of the things that we're doing. One of the items that we're working on as a group is a DHS uniform catalog. We have about 1,500 items on the contract, and most of those items have about a 20-character description. So there's not enough information to really gauge what that item is, who the vendor is, price point, how many units are sold each year, just all the information you'd like to know, a description of the item, pictures of the item. A lot of information is missing. So with that tool and that ability, that would allow components to see what's already on the contract and take advantage of a solution that may already be there rather than taking 18 to 24 months to develop their own solution. They could implement something within a month or two and have that available for their frontline personnel. We're also monitoring the ordering data across all DHS components so we can do DHS performance metrics and respond to questions from GAO, OMB, Congress, White House, wherever it may be, whether items are domestically sourced or not. We would have that information readily available to respond to that. And we're also excited about, we have a new uniform item spreadsheet that we're working on that as a component has a new need, we can reach out across all the components and say, hey, we have this need. Does somebody have something similar already on the contract? Or is there interest to collaborate and come up with a common solution? And just through that effort, we currently have 9 different items that have been identified for potential collaboration across the components. That didn't happen before. And we also have 16 opportunities to quickly implement or crosswalk something already on the contract and saving those components that 18 to 24 month period for development. So we're really excited about the direction we're going and look forward to continuing to mature these tools and to continue to mature the Commodity Council.
Oh, thanks for that info, Mike. It sounds like we're coming a long way, and through those efforts, we're getting closer to that one DHS. So, really appreciate that. Like I said, before we jump into questions, let me have each of the panelists share kind of their closing thoughts on how these category management principles are really helping the department. And then, if there were any questions, we will jump into those. So, Brenda, want to share some closing thoughts?
I think that the category management efforts, as I see it from my view as a contracting officer, through the strategic sources vehicles primarily, really help to provide ease of use, contract savings, and pre-vetted contractors or offers for all the primary services that we're procuring, and it really expedites the timelines, getting the ability to meet mission in the hands of our customers.
Great. Thank you, Brenda. Tina, you want to share your closing thoughts?
Sure. I think it needs to be remembered that all of these concepts of category management work hand in hand. They're not siloed. They don't work alone. So with what you do in one, it impacts the other. And I think having that global big picture understanding, the market intelligence, establishing those relationships with your suppliers so that you can be smart in the space that you're working, it's incredibly beneficial. And don't forget, it's not just about procurement. You know, there's opportunities across the lane that we may not necessarily need to go through those efforts. They may exist already. Just look for those.
Yep, it's not just about a contract vehicle. Thanks, Tina. And Mike, did you have any more closing thoughts?
I would concur. It's more than just the contract vehicle itself. Commodity Council is strong, gets stronger as we develop those relationships and work together for common solutions. We just don't let it end with the contract award, that we continue to work together on those vehicles moving forward and finding the best opportunities to provide what's needed out there for our frontline operators. So, thank you.
Yeah, it ends up being about the mission. So sometimes it does result in a contract vehicle. Sometimes it results in us being able to complete the mission quicker, faster, and more efficient and more effectively. I really appreciate your guys' time. Are there any questions out there? Please type them in the chat pod, and we will have our great panel go ahead and answer them for you guys. Let's see if we have any questions come in. So we have a question that came in for the panel. And we'll start with you, Brenda. From your perspective, what do you think SSO could do better to support your needs?
I think it'd be helpful to have more, inquiries or open dialogue about the things that we buy most commonly and the challenges that we're facing with those purchases.
Thanks, Brenda. Tina, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think for me, since I'm kind of a part of the SSO, when I'm wearing the category manager hat, the federal-wide one, I rely a great deal on the security and protection team in DHS for a lot of information. They do a lot of the heavy lifting for the category, government-wide category as a whole, just managing the BICs, et cetera. So I think the commodity councils that DHS has, they're hugely beneficial. There's so much information that comes out of those. And so I think those are definitely some things that we do right and that they help me quite a bit.
Thanks, Tina. Mike, any thoughts on that?
I get a lot of strong support from the Strategic Sourcing Office. I talk to them regularly, if not quite daily, but weekly. They help us to establish and keep the communication lines open with the other components. They help us with, or help me with the agenda and getting the meetings done, and we talk and coordinate issues that are coming up and how to best approach those. Just get a lot of strong support. So having the Strategic Sourcing Office as a very active member of the Commodity Council is, I think, key to being successful, and has been key to our being successful.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, and I think you really touched on an important note there is the open communication, open dialogue. The more we, as SSO, we try to get out and get out ahead of some of these requirements and just have open dialogue and communication even before, there's actually a need for, a contract vehicle or a need for us to really kind of do some of these category management possibilities. So thank you for that. Another question came in. It's for you, Tina. How can folks across DHS get involved in your government-wide efforts?
Oh, I love this question. I'm completely wide open. Just reach out to me. If there's a place that I can plug in, we can do that. We do have a government-wide category management team that we try to have monthly or bi-monthly meetings and kind of keep everything tracking. We definitely are interested in anybody's input on our annual strategic plans. Your feedback's invaluable. There's lots and lots of opportunities to plug in to our group, to what we're doing, what we're working with. Any outside perspectives are definitely appreciated. So definitely reach directly out to me. I'm wide open for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Let's see if we have any more questions that are coming in. All right, here's another question from York, another great question. I think this one would be for you, Mike. Would you like to see additional commodity councils started in other areas in addition to the WAC, the DEC, and the UC?
So I'm not familiar with the WAC or the DEC, so it'd be hard to answer that question, but seeing how successful the UCC or Uniform Commodity Council has been, I would highly recommend that to be with other strategic sourcing vehicles. I think it's important. We saw how many opportunities we missed between the time of that contract award, the Strategic Sourcing 1 vehicle, in 2014 through 2020. Lots of missed opportunities. We saw we're inefficiently running that contract vehicle. There was no coordination, no communication. Lots of missed opportunities. We're taking advantage of the economies of scale that DHS-wide would bring with commodities such as uniform items or textiles. Volume is a driver of price. So if you're not getting together and purchasing those things, you don't see those better price points as a result. So yeah, I would say any opportunity to get the other components together and work together as a team to work on common solutions. I would highly recommend that. And uniforms is kind of unique because each component has their own unique uniform. And it's kind of weird to have a strategic sourcing vehicle where you're trying to buy similar items when everybody wears something different. But there are opportunities even within the uniform program. Everybody wears shoes. Everybody has certain items that are going to be the same. The shirt and pants may be a different color, but it could be the same manufacturer. So there's always going to be opportunities to increase economies of scale and get better value for the government. So yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Gotcha. Tina, from a security and protection standpoint, are there any commodity councils that you might want? Any additional commodity councils?
I am plugged into those. One thing that I would say I would like to see is maybe some folks that have some subject matter expertise, say the working dogs, because we are standing up sub-teams within that. We, within DHS, I know that I'd like to see DHS do some work on the sub-teams as far as policy improvement and sharing of best practices, kind of lead those teams. Also, we're going to be standing up kind of government-wide mirrors of what SSO is doing, and that may be a good place for us to sync up and link up there to run those on a government-wide level and get a bigger picture.
Thanks, Tina. Brenda, from kind of a, I guess, IT or software standpoint, are there any commodity councils that you might want?
I'd have to think about it and get back. My purchasing area is very specific to software and software development services. So there are obviously some vehicles out there already, but how we buy at the Coast Guard has some different requirements because we have to be compliant with DoD regulations in addition to the DHS acquisition regulations.
Gotcha. Thanks, Brenda. Here's another question for the panel, and we can start with you on this one as well, Brenda. Do you feel that SSO is doing a good enough job in communicating? Like, are you hearing about new awards and the new stuff that we're doing quick enough? What do you think, Brenda?
I think they do a great job of communicating as they make awards and new guidance comes out. Or I would love to hear about what things are up and coming even before they are available for use, because I think that it would help us to strategize and align and be prepared when they become available.
Thanks. That's great feedback, Brenda. Thank you. Mike, could you also touch on that? Do you think we're doing a good enough job communicating?
I'm outside of the procurement arena, so I don't know how well that's communicated within procurement, but being outside of the procurement arena, I am not aware of some of the other strategic sourcing vehicles that have been awarded, so I would say maybe there is an opportunity to reach outside to program managers and others as a possibility, so that might be something to check into.
Gotcha. All right, we have another question that came in, and this one is for you, Mike, as well. What is one of the biggest challenges with uniforms that you and the UC are trying to solve?
I think the biggest one, there's multiple ones, is I think with any program there's always going to be challenges, but I think just the sheer volume of what we have on that contract makes this a very difficult vehicle to manage, and looking at ways to consolidate what's on there helps us in so many different areas. It affects us in pricing, it affects us in the ability to manage that contract. It impacts the amount of resources you have to put on that contract to manage it. 1,500 items on a contract is a significantly large contract, and with a value of about $600 million, it is rather large. So I think looking at ways to make that contract more manageable, looking for ways that will help expedite getting items on that contract as a result, or really consolidating. So I think looking at ways to consolidate that contract and get that number down to a more manageable number would benefit all the components, all the frontline operators. We'd see advantages to pricing. We see advantages in how quickly the uniform vendor can do shipments, because there's less inventory they have to maintain. They don't have all that 1,500 items. We could reduce that. So smaller warehouse space, better pricing. There's a lot of advantages to try to look at reducing that size of that contract and focus more on primary items that those guys need.
Great. Let's see. We had another question that came in, a question for Mike again. It says, what sharing tool are you using for your uniform initiative? I think they're looking to see how the components gain visibility on your program.
Sure.
Is there a SharePoint?
Yeah, sure. So currently we have representatives from each of the uniform components. We meet monthly. We have a commodity council meeting once a month. That spreadsheet currently is just an Excel spreadsheet where we're like, okay, here's the items that the different components are working through. These are new requirements that they're working through to add to the contract. Do you already have something on the contract similar? The question goes out to all the components. Do you have something similar already on the contract, or do you also have an unmet need that you would like to work with this other component together because of economies of scale? The more you buy, the cheaper the price. Would you like to work together, find a common solution? So currently it's distributed once a month. The Strategic Sourcing Office has put that together. If you'd like more information, feel free to email me, mike.britt@cbp.dhs.gov, and I can give you a lot more information on how we use it, how you can get involved, who your point of contact is. Be more than happy to help you through that.
Thank you, Mike. Let's see here. We have one more question that I have in here right now. Where can I find general information, documents, etc., about category management in its different areas? And Ms. Rubino just put that link in the chat pod. So there you go. You'll have that information in there, and you can go there and find all our contact information. And please feel free to reach out to us if you need any additional information, and we will be happy to kind of walk you through it. Let's see. I don't see any more questions. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if any more questions come in.
So Lee, if I might, I'd like to drop my email into the chat so that those that are interested in kind of getting some involvement in government-wide security and protection, we can gather that up.
Absolutely, please. We'll wait another minute or so here to see if any more questions come in. I'll make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right, one more came in for Mike. What platform are you planning to use for the uniforms catalog?
So we see ourselves rolling that out in phases, using probably the first phase, something that's readily available, like SharePoint, maybe some sort of Microsoft tool, maybe Excel, but something simple to roll out. And then as we get the information, get more mature, to put that into some better tool with a lot more functionality to do searches and other things that would make it a lot easier to use. But we're looking at 2 to possibly 3 phases. And the first phase, just try to get it out there quickly and something that's readily available, while we focus on developing a more robust system. We haven't decided what those are. We've got a list of 2 or 3 that we're evaluating, but that's kind of the game plan. That's a lot of information when you're talking 1,500 items and trying to get pictures and manufacturers of all these items and adding that in there. It's going to take some time for that team to get through that. But yeah, it's a multi-year initiative, but we think it's going to be huge once that's fully developed. And as I said, it'll be multiple phases over the next probably 2 to 3 years.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a huge undertaking, but I'm sure it's well worth the time. Alrighty. See, we have a few more people typing. We'll wait to see if there are any more questions coming in. Okay, I don't see anything else coming in. I will go ahead and start wrapping up here. I want to thank the panelists for your time and sharing all of your great information today. Thank you guys for working across DHS and the federal government, to save taxpayers time and money. So really appreciate it. Does anybody have any last remarks? All righty. Well, I will turn it back over to Ricardo and Jenna, and they will take us out.